Hello and welcome. My name is Ugochukwu, and thanks for joining us again on this episode of Future Discussions podcast. And I'm very pleased and happy to have on the show Mr. Quincy Newell. Quincy Newell is an extraordinary mind who has achieved a lot in the media and entertainment industry. His career in the entertainment and media business spans over 30 years. He's had a lot of experience in that area and he's held senior level posts at a variety of independent and mainstream film and music companies and has been involved in the production and marketing of some of urban entertainment's most notable properties. So Mr. Quincy is joining us today and he will be discussing with us the future of entertainment and the media industry, the future of media and entertainment industry. So I will be delving into details, some of the questions, some of the realities that have come on board since the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown, how that has really affected the media and entertainment industry. And he will be sharing with us his thoughts on that and many other interesting issues. So it's with great pleasure that I would like to welcome you, Mr. Quincy, on Future Discussions podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, man. Appreciate it. Glad to be
All
here.
right. Yeah, that's great. That's great. So I'm going to start off personally from your own experience. You've been in the industry for over 30 years now. So could you share with us some of your experiences when it comes to the entertainment industry, the high points and the low points, and the changes that you've witnessed over the years as you have continued to be in this industry, the changes that you've witnessed over the years, and how that is transforming, how that is changing, how that is transforming the entertainment industry, and what do you think it will make of it in the next 10 to 20 years from now?
Right. Well, that's, I wish I was a visionary where I can, nail it. I'd be super wealthy right now if I can call it for everyone, but I'll do my best.
That's great.
Over my time, I have been in the industry long enough to see, the evolution of media and entertainment through the advancement of technology and the advent of digital technology, right? So, my earlier days, I'm old enough to have been around when there was VHS tapes. I was also in the music industry. I was around before the CD
Wow.
came. We were, still selling albums and, cassette tapes, singles, and so on. But the biggest, shift, in my opinion, the biggest kind of disruption really came through the advancement of technology, right? So, being able to, or I should say, monetize and have commerce online, right, via the internet, as well as just the technology that's shifting the formats, right? So, for instance, when from the music side, when you went from tapes to actual CD disc, right, that was a huge jump. And then from the CD disc to MP3 downloads, right? Again, a huge jump, which each one kind of really changed the way the business models worked because the economics attached to each kind of advancement shifted. We're seeing a lot of those effects right now within the film and television industry, right? Again, by the advent of technology, sharing the ability to sell and monetize online, but also digital technology through all facets, right? And that's not only by means of consuming and delivery, but let's think about how we, the traditional models, like theatrical, right? You were conditioned to go into movies. And one thing in the background, what we don't realize is, through the advent of digital technology, the theater experience has changed from a business perspective, right? We as a distributor, if you will, would have to spend money on creating film cans. I don't know if the film can image you've seen, that went away. Companies that were, kind of built and founded on, creating negatives and, duplicating film and cans and delivering cans, which I mean film cans, reels, to the theaters, and the theater has a projector, that changed, right? Because now it's a drive. It's no longer a piece of film, right? The cameras associated with it again changed, right? Because you're not shooting in film, you're shooting with digital, digital technology in a DSLR or something. All the way down to kind of the economies of scale with respect to the tools that you use. I remember there was, if you were an editor, there was a system called Avid that all editors worked on, and it was a high-priced, costly tool to be able to use. And then Apple came out with Final Cut Pro, and you can get it on your desktop. And that changed things because now a person didn't have to have an Avid machine and didn't have to pay an Avid editor, which was a highly paid area or job. That person can do it at home and have the same quality as anyone else, especially now that you had digital files that you were editing from. So, there's been a lot of change. A lot of it now, though, is hitting the consumer side. What we're seeing is Netflix, game changer. Netflix has disrupted the industry dramatically. But again, what are we seeing? We're just seeing new means of delivery, creation, and consumption, right? We are now watching things differently. We're watching things on our phone, right? We have the technology that allows us to be 4K. So there's radical changes going on. It's interesting to see, but it's not new. It's been going on for a very long time, right? Music, film, television. And if you think back, just disruption in industry, it's just, that's history. We've always had disruption and shifts in industry models, but I think what we're seeing, it's happening more frequently. Again, with the advancement of technology, how the new iteration used to be, multiple years, and now it's like, every other year there's a new technology that's just replacing the prior, right? It's kind of the same thing that we're seeing now. It's just moving a lot quicker. So, that's kind of, generally, what I've, observed is just, simply digital technology has radically disrupted media and entertainment, created efficiencies, created, an ease of use, a lowering of the bar with respect to creators and, business. Technological advances have created tools that allow people to access and participate in the industry in a way that you couldn't prior, before that technology was available. And now there's a new kind of paradigm that everyone's operating in. I think we're all trying to figure it out and get adjusted to what the new normal will be.
Okay, that's interesting. You talked about the changes that have happened. So these changes are in the area of technology, the tools that were being used to create. But have you noticed in the course of these changes that have happened over the years and are still happening, have you noticed any significant change or even a minute change in the character and the quality of production? No, I wouldn't say production now, but the quality of producers and the creators in themselves. Have you noticed any shifts? Has the changes in this technology affected the quality of output that creators have been putting out, the things they are putting out?
Yeah, I think so. I think across, music, right? So if you're a music person, if you are, someone that really loves a particular sound and, the quality of the sound, we become desensitized to that, right? Because MP3 files don't have the range and the depth and the warmth of sound that, maybe, a 4-track or 8-track, or a 4-track would have a recording, right? You have multi-track recording, that you would then, release with some, high quality mixing and all of that. When you put it in the digital realm, it kind of flattens all of that a bit, right? And you don't have that dynamic nature to music. But we're used to that now, right? So you can go on and share a file, and it's perfectly fine for you to listen to it in that form. Where someone that was like a pure audio file that spent a lot of money on their sound system, they're not satisfied with that. So That's one factor. So the quality output in the creativity, you know, yes, in that the quality has uh, declined. Yes, in that there's more creators creating today. So what I'm going to say is
But
that I don't know that digital or the technology is a cause of a person that would normally create quality content now creating lesser quality content. I think what you're seeing is there's more creators as a result of the tools that have been made available through the advancement of technology, right?
yeah, so more like the technology has increased the number of outputs, but
Yeah,
the
the
has
amount of output.
but has decreased the quality of the single output. So the one that is produced. So if
Mm-hmm.
I got you right,
Yeah,
let's say technology has allowed for exponential increase in output.
an output.
So
Yes.
yeah, but the quality of each one has over the years significantly reduced or increasingly reduced. Is that what I'm
Well,
capable of
it's
saying?
sort of. I think the exponential growth in the output, right?
Okay.
It you know gives a POV or perspective that maybe generally content quality output has decreased, right? But if you say, okay, I'm going to take prior to creators having access to tools that will allow them to create without having to get approval from someone, right? Before, if you're a filmmaker, you had to try to go and have someone allow you to create
Yeah.
content because you needed money.
Yeah.
Now you
Yeah.
don't, right? You can just pick up your phone, your computer, and you're good to go. So prior to having that access, you had highly skilled content creators, right? Spielberg and these people that were trained, that had the ability to have access to equipment that might have gone through schooling that some folks may not have access to. So the pool was narrow, right? It was shallow, meaning that you had a small group of content creators that had access. Now, as a result of technology, you have a bunch of creative people that at all levels having access to tools that allow them to create. So what they've done is they've joined the party, but a lot of that content might not be quality because again, you are just learning. You're just starting. But the difference is at a person that's just starting and that's starting to gain experience, they also have access to the tools and the tools and the technology available not only to create but also to publish. So you're seeing a lot of new content out there. Another factor I think is the 24/7 kind of media environment that we all live in, right? So you know prior there was a limited window, right? I don't know if you're old enough to remember when television would go off at a certain time, right? It would just go to static and there was no programming.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know
Sure. Yeah. I remember
but
that.
now with the internet, it's like everything's 24/7. So by default, you need a lot more content, right? So in order to fill that pipeline with content, you're going to then lower the bar on what kind of content or what quality level of content is available, and it's also dependent upon the outlet itself, like YouTube versus HBO, right? Those are different tiers of content. YouTube content can be anything theoretically. HBO has a certain level of quality that it demands and it requires, right? It has a brand that kind of emits that's what we are going to be focused on. So then the tiers of content quality are now broadened as well, right? Because you have platforms that support anyone that puts up content, and then you still have existing platforms that require a certain level of quality. So I think it's the dynamic of the market that's created uh, the need for an abundance of content, and by default, you have a different tier of quality that's acceptable, quote unquote acceptable in the space. But I
Mm.
still think they're at the end of the day, consumers ultimately determine
Yeah.
what is marketable and what is consumable, right? And and I think quality will always win. But then there's creativity, right? Creativity in and of itself can be quality, right? Because you think about quality with respect to what it looks like, what kind of format you're using, the resolution. But at the end of the day, if you're creative and you're very smart, you have the ability to create content. The visual quality might be a little bit lower, but the creative quality could be extremely high.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I'm talking about the creative quality. That is one thing from my own perspective. Something I have seen that is hugely lacking in majority of the output that we have today, in the creative works we have today. And so I talk about this from my very young age, from the time I was very young. I used to be an ardent fan of Michael Jackson, because every of his music really transformed me. As a matter of fact, I got a little shoe in my house. In those days, we used to call it the Michael Jackson shoe. We used to call it the Jackson shoe. So anytime we wanted to perform any of his dance steps in our house, we'll quickly get that shoe, and then we'll wear it, and then we'll try to do the black sliding and all of those stuff and all of that. So it really helped influence us during those years, growing up. I would be categorized as a millennial. So growing up in those years, I was very little, but I saw that the music, the level of quality, and even the depth of the depth of creativity that was seen in the lyrics of the songs of Michael Jackson, of Celine Dion, of even Tupac Shakur, all of
Mhm.
those qualities, Neck Dog, all of those people really resonated, and it was really very deep. But
Sure.
today, majority of what we have, there's so many songs out there that they come in, and before you know, they're out of phase. So we're finding it difficult to really, wrap our hands around it, and we're finding it very difficult to get something that is really evergreen, like it used to be put.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think but art is subjective too, right? I mean, we have to
Yeah,
acknowledge that.
yeah. Aristotle would say that.
Yeah. And the market will always determine what is quality and what is not, right? Now
True.
we judge quality based off of prior standards, right?
Mm,
Which I'm an advocate for. Like, well, yeah, like I'm a big fan of musicianship, right? Like people knowing how to play instruments, and that I call that an artist. I don't call an artist personally, someone that doesn't have the ability to do anything other than maybe perform, right? But that is an artist, right? That's
yeah.
just my point of view. I look at artistry and I define it in the way that I see it, right?
Mm,
So I think it's all subjective. So when you say um, the quality is different and changed, yes, I think so. But then um, the audience determines what quality is. And,
yeah.
like I think about my kids, I'm a bit older, my kids love things that I can't understand. Like, that's terrible. What are you talking about? Like, and I try to show them like, yeah, here's Most Def. This is what an MC looks like, and
Yeah.
here's like, but it doesn't matter to them because again, I think it is what you have been, that person has what's been normalized, right? Like we talked about the sound, right? What we're used to hearing, so people like right now, you can play something on your phone or MP3, totally fine, right? But when it changed at that point of shift, if you would have said, like, here's something that is high quality sound versus an MP3, it's night and day, right? But now, you can't buy a turntable anywhere, right? They're not making vinyl anymore, right? They're not recording, on tape anymore, right? So everything you see and hear is made with new technology and it's normalized, right? So now, what is quality? Can you say that it's not quality? And it's interesting. I think the more content that is created, that has a wide spectrum of what we all subjectively determine as quality, and the standards that we set with respect to quality, it's going to be different for everyone, I think, and I think it has a lot to do with generation, what you've been exposed to, throughout life. Like, for instance, right now, when, we talk about, virtual reality, right? The VR experience, or an augmented reality experience, or 5G, whatever that will beget, right? We're going to be saying, oh, that prior experience sitting in the movie theater was trash. Somebody will say that, right? How could you have done that, right? That's terrible. When, I have my VR experience, I'm inside the movie. Like, what are you talking, it's, but is that true? I don't know. Maybe not for me. I may enjoy sitting in the theater because that is my paradigm, right? Versus getting into a VR world, because that's disorienting, right? Because that's not what I'm used to. Whereas a person that grew up with VR is looking back, like my kids, when I talk about vinyl, right? They're like, what? And they're looking at like, why? Like, what is this? And I'm trying to explain the technical quality and all that. They're like, what are you talking about? Why? It takes up so much space. What are you doing? It's just generational, and it's really with, it's a subjective thing. So, I think an industry that has established a standard of quality, has that shifted from what it used to be? Yeah, absolutely. But is that the same with respect to people that consume? Or do they think quality level has shifted radically? And I think it's based off of their own experience and perspective.
Yeah, that's interesting. So still on how technology is really transforming the entertainment industry. I'd like to go a little bit to Africa here. And so since the 2000s, we are noticing the current rise in the African pop culture, and we've seen that transformed into Afrobeats, and it's really taking over the entertainment industry. Now, before now, what's dominated, like when we were growing up, the kind of music we heard were mainly American songs like Michael Jackson's of this world, Celine Dion, Tupac Shakur, Jay-Z, and all of that. But now, increasingly, if you come in my country, we almost do not listen to American songs any longer. There are almost no American songs any longer. So it's mainly hugely dominated by Afrobeats. And we also see that is gradually becoming mainstream in the global space. And so talk to us a little bit about your experience in the entertainment industry, and your opinion as to how this is really changing the entertainment industry, how it's circulating. What do you think? Where do you see this going? How do you see this turning out? Do you see this as do you think it will gradually bring out the African culture and introduce the African identity and reimagine the African in the global space? Do you think that entertainment, their culture, through music, through arts, will transform the image of the African person? And do you think that where do you see this headed in the next 10 to 20 years?
Yeah, there was a lot of questions in that question. I might ask you again to remind me the second part, but when you're talking about the Afrobeat music, I love it, number one. But I always said that just my POV is, look, our influences of music, period, always came from African and Afrobeat music, right? That, the African rhythms, right? Or indigenous rhythms, which all, in my opinion, are kind of rooted in, African rhythms, right? Whether it be, Afro-Cuban music or, Latin music, generally, if you just think about how all of those influences, have permeated music throughout history in America, right? So I want to first say that's my POV. I guess someone could fact check me, right? Just as much as a lot of culture throughout, fashion, music, wherever is, really driven by, in America, Black culture, right? The Black influences, again, all the way down to music, right? And style. So, I think there's always been a infusion of the um, kind of indigenous, culture and trends that have been kind of sucked in and absorbed and exploited by kind of mainstream business entertainment, hip hop as one as well, right? Probably one of the biggest influences of our time with respect to style, fashion, music, and so on. Now, when you mention kind of the Afrobeat, kind of taking over globally. Well, I also say, look, you just mentioned, you were talking about Jay-Z and Michael Jackson and so on. So over time, the generation that was, consuming those musics, that music at that time are also the same people that are influenced now and creating their version, what makes sense to them based off of their personal influences and their musical influences into something fresh and new, right? So I just think it's a circle. I just think it's it's doing this. It's circulating and coming through different voices and mediums. You think about reggaeton, right? Reggaeton is again influenced by other things, but the people that were consuming music or entertainment at a time were influenced by that from their worldview, and then they turn around and they create something that's more resonant to them. They take the pieces, it's like ingredients when you're cooking, right? You take ingredients that everyone has access to, but then you put them together in a way that makes sense for you, right? That might represent you in a way that might be different from someone else. So, I think, it's cyclical. It'll be, something that will kind of circulate, and everyone will have input and a contribution to the different ways of representing and articulating your art, right? But I think we can't ignore the influence, I believe, that America has gleaned, or the how much the world has influenced America, right? American style, everything else, right? Because we are a melting pot. People that are here are all essentially immigrants, right? So we all come from everywhere else. And we're just, creating something new and calling it ours. So I'm really, like, for instance, with Beyonce's Black is King, I love that, that mini movie, because what we're seeing now, because of the connectivity that we have, the ability to connect around the world, thanks to social media and thanks to, technology, allow us to now, touch each other in a different way. Whereas before we were completely disconnected, and unless you had a way to travel and move around and communicate, it was very, a lot more difficult. But now it's not as difficult, right? So I think influences it'll accelerate. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. And, quite frankly, I think, certain groups are going to rise to the top because, again, certain groups have always been the drivers of what I consider popular culture, right?
Yeah.
And people take their rightful place. So
yeah, yeah. Okay,
and there's a second half to that.
That's okay. Yeah.
10, 20 years from now, right?
Yeah, I wanted to chip in. Do you think that it's gonna reimagine? It's gonna help the world to reimagine or to reconfigure their construct, their understanding of the African person. That's the African image, because over the years, after the brutal colonialism, the African image has really been tarnished and really been distorted. And so
around the world, you're saying that.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, do you think the African, this new pop culture that has been driven by Afrobeat music and all of that, and you see that it's not just in music and in movies, it is also happening in across the arts and in literature. Is happening in the kind of novels and poetry. So we see that a lot of new ideas are popping up there that are really rooted in African pop culture. So, do you think it will help to reshape the ideology or or people's image, the global image about the African person, and maybe give the African a new hope uh, going forward?
Yes, absolutely. I think so. I think so. I think so without a doubt. Right. I think what has been hidden will come to light. I think what has been distorted and manipulated will become clear. I think knowledge that has been, um, I guess, changed or shifted or, reimagined will be, revealed in a way that it really should be. And I think we're seeing that now around the world, right? Where, even here in America, where, we are learning a lot more about what is real and what isn't,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Even about our own personal histories. I mean, I know that, you know, like the difference between a Black American, um, there's a question about whether, do you call yourself Black or not, but, Black, in my POV, Black American versus a person that is, from Africa. We have two different experiences. And there's you know, from what I've heard and having conversation, there's like a disconnect to some degree, or there has been a disconnect. But I think now that we have the ability to communicate and to learn and to have access to information that we might not have had access to prior, we'll start to enlighten people in a different way, right? And to, dispel some untruths, and to, you know, shed light on certain truths. For instance, one thing, I don't know if, I've recently been learning about the Moors, right? I don't know, like, are you familiar with the Moorish Empire?
no, come again. The
Moors?
Moorish?
Moors, are you familiar with the Moors?
No, no, I'm not. I'm not familiar with it.
Well, then maybe, hopefully, because you're from Africa and I'm not, right? But
Mm,
in my studies in history, there is, documents that state that North Africans, which were at a time, I think, maybe in the 600s or close to 700s AD, were referred to as Moors, right? And North African Moors controlled and conquered the Iberian Peninsula, which was currently Spain, right? And controlled and ran it for 700 years. And I believe they were Muslim dominant back in that time. It might still be that way. And that's a history, that I'm learning about, but I had no idea. And it's not taught here in America, which basically says that, look, the Moorish Empire, which controlled the Iberian Peninsula, which is Spain, from 700 AD to 1400 something AD, 700 some odd years, is a little known fact. And they were African, right? And before, the Spanish, I forgot the king, maybe King Ferdinand or Spanish king, then conquered that territory, took it over, and then it became Spain. So like things like that, for a person that's from America, learning more about their heritage and also learning more about the African people and African descendants around the world, paints a completely different picture of who we are than what has been taught, right? For me as an American. So I say that all to say, as things like that become more available, more well-known and more available to people access, I think by default, you're going to have a paradigm shift of how people are viewed, right? Because what we are viewed through, I think currently, is a lens of Western I guess, Western culture. I don't know if you know, but European, meaning
Yeah.
Western colonialism, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
how everything has been defined from that lens. But that is a lens. That is not all the lenses, right? And I think we just need to have access to more lenses to look through. And I believe that we will, and we are. I mean, it's happening right now. I think what you're seeing in America is, I call it awakening, right? It's troublesome, of course, but it's an awakening. It's people are being, things are being revealed, and we're starting to see things differently, and not just us, but other people, right? Before it was just us fighting against, a view, but now other people see it as well. And that has to do with, I think, really truthfully, technology, because it allowed us to communicate, to touch each other in a different way. Meaning, you're sitting in Nigeria and I'm sitting in Los Angeles, and we're having a conversation. Before these tools were available, we couldn't do this, right? So anything you told me about, or anything I knew about Nigeria was told by someone. Maybe that's never been there. It's only in a book, right?
Yeah.
Or showed on television.
Yeah.
But the more people I talk to, the more I'm like,
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
what? Really? Oh, dang. Okay, yeah. So I guess nothing like it's what's being told, right? Or what's shown on television. So it's like I think that opens up the door for change. So I think the answer to is ultimately is yes. I think it will absolutely change, and I think we're starting to see that now, and also a different respect level, for the role that Africa generally has played on the world stage. Right? I don't think it's I don't think it's shared and represented accurately in all areas.
Yeah. That's
That's
great.
my view. I could be, but I'm an American, guy, so it's just my POV. You can tell me I'm
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. That's really fascinating thoughts there that you've got there. I agree with you largely because so when you talk about the African and the role we have played in the world, which and we are still playing,
Mm-hmm.
it's largely been covered. It's largely been overshadowed because of the noise of colonialism and Western heritage. And
Mm-hmm.
so, when people become colonized and their identity has been, to a very large extent, shrinked or covered, and so it becomes very difficult for those people to really go back within themselves to tap the essence for which they have been made and to birth a new reality from that. So it's very difficult. So it takes a lot of years, centuries, and huge amounts of time for people to really do that. So, but I think what is now allowing us to do this now is technology. Digital technology has really leveled the playing ground. It has decentralized the system, and I think that is what is happening with even the Afro beats. You see that before now it used to be the Western music being dominated because they own the technology and they had access to most of those resources. But digital technology has now made it possible for the African to now bring out its culture, and you see the originality and the authenticity that is within that culture being birthed, being produced, and it is almost irresistible when it's produced. So you see Nollywood movies, it's out there, and you talk about the Moorish people, the Moorish Empire, and the strides that they made over the years, and some of those things have been buried in the sands of history. Now, if
Mm-hmm.
someone who is really creative and someone who really understands this history now taps into this and then rebrands that history and tries to create some kind of, and puts it into art and try to create something very new, like Black Panther, you now see that reshaping people's mentality and people's understanding of the African person. And I think is really going to do a lot of great stuff for the African image.
Yeah.
So I think you've got great thoughts there. So before I conclude, I'd like to ask you the last question, and that is COVID-19. So
Yeah.
I want to know the impact of COVID-19 on the media and entertainment industry globally. How has it really affected the entertainment industry, and what ways do you think, like the other sectors are beginning to gradually get themselves back? Do you think the entertainment industry is finding its footing, or do you think it's really going to take more time for it to get back?
Well, there's so many facets, right, of it, the entertainment and media industry, that exists, right? And everyone,
Yes.
every area I think has been affected differently. Obviously, content creation, which is a big component. Depending upon, gaming might not have that much issue, right? Because gaming, is, a computer-based creation medium, right? But film production, you know, can be radically disruptive because it's a communal thing. It's you physically together, with a group of people, and you're creating content. So I think depending upon where you sit, it's different. But I think what is undisputable is that it has accelerated um, the transformation that was already taking place in the industry at large, right? You take, theatrical, which is a big piece of the film business. It's almost gone, right? But we're thinking it's purely because of COVID. Well, no, COVID accelerated it. It was already on the decline, right? And I think it also accelerated innovation, right? It's forced people to think about how to do things differently. It has accelerated the adoption of technology, whereas I think before there was an adoption, but then there was a little bit of resistance and wanting to stay, doing what was always done. Now I think it forced the adoption of technology generally. Think about the operational component, right? We're sitting on Zoom, like Zoom. I never even heard of Zoom before COVID, right? And I know there's other video conferencing technologies, but nobody wanted to do that, right? Because everybody was either meeting, flying across the country, having meetings in offices and that sort of thing. But now there's a real thought about, wait a minute, can this be a new way of doing business? Are we actually more productive? Do I need to spend all that money on an office space? Can we work virtually? We have technology available to us. Why aren't we leveraging it in a way that actually helps us become more efficient and possibly save money, from an operating perspective? So, I think it's disrupted the industry clearly because of just the halt of operations, right? The inability to do business as normal. And those industries that were not fully plugged into technology as a way of doing business have been forced to shift and change. And those companies and organizations are more impacted than maybe others. But then you have, a accelerated shift in who you should be defining as Hollywood, right? Is it Warner Brothers and Disney, or is it Netflix and Google and Apple, right? Who's really driving today, right? And I would think, when we think of Hollywood, Hollywood has a new paradigm now. I think Hollywood is really run by Netflix and Apple and Google, right? The other so much so that the other major companies have had to radically change their entire business model to compete, to stay competitive. And that is not a result of COVID. That was already happening before COVID. COVID forced it. COVID accelerated it. COVID said, you need to do it now. It's not a gradual shift, it's a now shift, right? Because it impacted other areas of the business, right? Think about Disney, theme parks, content creation, production, distribution, just, you would think they have a portfolio that is diversified, but COVID impacted everything pretty much, right? Except for consumption, right? So streaming services have been doing extremely well. Why? Because it's a technology based, interaction, and we're all stuck at home. And what do? We consume content, we entertain ourselves. So it just, I think it's spotted. Depends on, I think Netflix has probably thrived, throughout this entire, all those kind of streaming, first businesses strive. Facebook strived, I'm sorry, they thrived. Netflix thrived, Facebook thrived, and anywhere that was kind of technology based, everything else that had like an offline component that leaned on that heavily and that played a large component or a role in their business operations, infected significantly, right? So I think it's really interesting. I think it's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Just the acceleration of things, acceleration of change.
Yeah. 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 You've been very, very amazing, Mr. Quincy, and it's been a great pleasure having you on this show. I really thank you for making out the time to come and share with us your wealth of experience and your insights into the media and entertainment industry and the changes that are happening. And I really enjoyed your insight, your deep insight as to the African aspect of it and how it's really reshaping the world from the entertainment industry, down to across other streams. So I really want to thank you for making our time to honor this invitation. And I hope that when next we call upon you, that you would honor us, you will give us the privilege to also talk to you and glean from your wisdom. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you very much for having me, man. See you next time.
Yeah, thank you so much. You've been great.
Take
So
care,
guys,
brother.
thank you so much for joining us on today's show. We'll be speaking with Quincy Newell. He's a great friend of TAFFDs, and he's also had a lot of experience in the media and entertainment industry over 30 years. And so when he's talking, he's really speaking from experience, and he's got a lot. And so I really encourage you guys to check him out. So Quincy, if they want to find you, where can they find you online?
Oh, you can find me at 2114media.com.
Okay.
And I'm an attorney as well. And my law firm is newellpc.com.
Okay. That's great.
Thank you
So
very
guys,
much.
yeah. So guys, so you had to go. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you some other time.